Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to completely demystify the French press. Look, if you're tired of waking up to watery, underwhelming, or, just overly bitter coffee, you are in the exact right place. By the end of our time together today, you'll have all the knowledge you need to say a permanent goodbye to those disappointing morning mugs. Instead, you'll be brewing a bold, robust, and full-bodied cup right in your very own kitchen. We're going to dive deep into the science, the equipment, and the precise technique to totally elevate your daily coffee ritual.
Okay, let's look at the roadmap for today. We're going to meet the French press, check out the essential equipment, master the grind, walk through the step-by-step brewing process, and finally wrap things up with cleanup and next steps.
All right, starting us off with Section 1, Meet the French press. So what actually is this thing? Well, at its core, the French press, which you might also hear called a cafeteria or maybe a coffee plunger, is a wonderfully straightforward manual brewing device. You see, unlike typical drip machines that just rush water through the grounds, a French press allows the coffee to steep intimately with the water. The grounds are fully submerged in just boiled water until the brewing is totally complete. Then you just push a built-in filter downward, separating your brewed coffee from the grounds. It's this gentle, full immersion steeping process that creates such a recognizable specific flavor profile. And this right here is exactly why coffee lovers are so obsessed with it. Because the water and the coffee get to, hang out together for several minutes, you get an incredibly bold, full-bodied coffee. It's just a heavy, really satisfying cup. And because of that intense flavor extraction, medium to dark roasts tend to work exceptionally well in a French press. Basically, the longer the brew time, the bolder your final cup's going to be, giving you complete control over the strength of your morning brew.
Moving right along to Section 2, Essential Brewing Equipment. Now, obviously, you'll need a kettle, ideally with a thermometer so your water is the exact right temp, and a digital scale for consistency. But your main tool is the carafe itself, and there are quite a few factors to consider here. First, material and insulation. You can find glass, stoneware, plastic, or metal, but if you want to keep your brew perfectly hot, which frankly makes for way better coffee, double-walled metal or glass options are fantastic. You also need to think about cost, design, and capacity. Capacity is actually super important. You want to match the size of your press to the batch you're making. Trying to make a tiny single cup in a massive French press will literally ruin the quality. And finally, always check customer reviews on the filter quality, because that's the part doing the heavy lifting at the end.
But here is a real game changer, getting the grinder right. Grinding whole beans immediately before brewing is an absolute must for freshness. And as you can see, a burr grinder is vastly superior to a blade grinder for this. Why? Well, a burr grinder gently crushes the beans, giving you a perfectly consistent grind. It extracts flavor evenly and preserves all those precious coffee oils and aromas. A blade grinder, on the other hand, well, it spins like crazy, kind of like a food processor. It leaves you with a totally inconsistent grind, takes a lot of practice to control, and will negatively impact the taste of your coffee.
Which brings us nicely to Section 3, Mastering the Grind.
Now, this is super fascinating. There's this golden rule in coffee brewing. The longer the water is in contact with the coffee, the coarser your grind needs to be. Think about espresso. It brews in mere seconds, right? So it needs a super fine grind, like table salt. But a French press immerses the grounds in water for minutes, so you absolutely need a coarse grind. You're aiming for a texture that looks a lot like rock salt.
So what happens if things go wrong? Well, consider this your ultimate troubleshooting cheat sheet. If you take a sip and it tastes horribly bitter or sour, your coffee is over-extracted. That means your grounds were way too fine. You gotta go larger and coarser next time. Conversely, if it tastes flat or kind of watery, it's under-extracted. That means your coffee was ground too coarse and the water just couldn't pull enough flavor out. So you'd grind finer. Basically, remember this. Bitter means go coarser, watery means grind finer.
Okay, let's hit some rapid-fire sippable facts, starting with the ideal coffee-to-water ratio. To get that robust flavor, you want a ratio of 1 gram of coffee to 10 grams of water. Or, you can scale that up to 1 gram of coffee to 16 grams of water if you prefer it slightly less intense. Using that digital scale we talked about earlier is going to be absolutely crucial for keeping this consistent day after day. Next up, temperature. You're aiming for exactly 93 degrees Celsius, give or take about 3 degrees. If you don't have a fancy kettle with a built-in thermometer, definitely grab a manual one. Actually, trying to guess the temp when boiling water on the stove makes this nearly impossible to control, and if that water is too hot, you're literally going to scorch those beautiful beans and ruin the whole extraction. And our final sippable fact is a magic number, 4.
Your total brewing time needs to be approximately 4 minutes of contact between the coffee and the water. This is the absolute sweet spot for a coarse grind to release its bold body without, tipping over into that awful bitterness.
All right, moving to section 4, step-by-step brewing.
Hold on, before you pour a single drop, let's make sure you've nailed these 3 foundational elements for success. First, make sure you've picked the right beans. Think about variety, origin, and grabbing that medium to dark roast. Second, grind them to that coarse, rock salt size right before you brew. And third, this is a big one. Use cold, filtered water in your kettle. Don't use distilled or softened water. The natural minerals in filtered water are actually what help pull the best flavors out of the coffee. Okay, let's put it all together. Just follow these 5 steps. Step 1, bring your water to a boil. Take it off the heat and just let it rest for about 30 seconds. That helps hit that perfect 93 degrees Celsius. Step 2, add your coarse coffee to the carafe. Then pour in the hot water. Step 3, wait exactly 1 minute. You're going to see a crust of grounds form at the top. Totally normal. Grab a wooden spoon and just gently stir to break it up. Step 4, pop the lid on with the plunger pulled all the way up and let it steep for 3 more minutes. And step 5, gently push the plunger down. Oh, and the golden rule here, serve it immediately. If you leave the coffee sitting on those grounds at the bottom, it'll just keep brewing and turn super bitter.
Almost done. Section 5, cleanup and next steps.
I know no one likes doing the dishes, but it is incredibly important to clean your gear after every single use. You have to disassemble and wash the entire press, paying super close attention to the filter. You want to completely strip away any leftover grounds and coffee oils, which are known as caffeole. If you leave caffeole sitting on that metal mesh, it goes totally stale, and it will for sure taint your next batch. Trust me, future you will be so incredibly grateful when tomorrow's cup isn't ruined by yesterday's stale bitterness.
So, have you perfected your French press technique yet? We've broken down the gear, the coarse grind, the 93-degree water, and that essential 4-minute steep. But honestly, the French press is just the gateway. Now that you understand the invisible science behind extraction, how are you going to manipulate time, temperature, and grind size to completely reinvent your morning ritual? Enjoy your freshly pressed coffee and stay curious.